Every November, I sit on my sofa in my college rooms to read this year's batch of undergraduate applications, and I read the same thing in almost exactly the same words. I want to study the ancient world because Greece and Rome are the roots of Western civilization. I understand why some of my prospective students see things the way they do. Respectable reference sources from the Encyclopaedia Britannica to Wikipedia describe the development of a distinctive, bounded Western culture built on the ideas and values of Greece and Rome, lost to Europe during the Dark Ages, but rediscovered by the Renaissance. Sometimes the story also involves the lands and literature of the Bible, but if other ancient civilizations are mentioned at all, it is only to be superseded by the classical world in an inexorable march of history and culture west. The predecessors of the Greeks and Romans may be interesting, even impressive, but they are not ours. Any contribution they make is trumped by that of Greece and Rome, held responsible for all manner of good things, from philosophy and democracy to theatre and concrete. The neighbours of the Greeks and Romans are ignored altogether, along with later encounters between Western Europeans and people to their north, south, and east. You might think that as a classics professor, I'd approve. I've found Greco-Roman studies rich and rewarding myself, and the place staked out for Greeks and Romans at the heart of ideas about the West is one of the reasons my subject still exists. But 3 decades of teaching and research have convinced me that a narrative focused solely on Greece and Rome impoverishes our view of the past, and impoverishes our understanding of our own world. The real story behind what is now called the West is much bigger and more interesting. For one thing, Greeks and Romans had their own histories, rooted in other places and older peoples, and they adapted most of their ideas and technologies from elsewhere. Law codes and literature from Mesopotamia, stone sculpture from Egypt, irrigation from Assyria, and the alphabet from the Levant. They knew this, and they celebrated it. Greeks were also well aware that they shared the Mediterranean with others, Carthaginians and Etruscans, Iberians and Israelites, and that they lived alongside more powerful empires to the east. Their legends link Greek heroes to the queens, kings, and gods of foreign lands, both real and imagined. Phoenicians, Phrygians, Amazons. Rome's foundation myth, meanwhile, made the city a place of asylum for refugees, while the Roman poet Catullus can imagine travelling with friends to India, Arabia, Parthia, Egypt, and even to the Britons on the edge of the world. For another thing, Greeks and Romans rarely share what are now called Western values. In fact, much of what these ancients took for granted would seem unfamiliar today, or even unacceptable. Athenians practiced democracy for men, who lauded the seduction of boys, while their women went silent and veiled. Romans embraced slavery on a massive scale, and they watched public executions for fun. Finally, there is no privileged connection between ancient Greeks and Romans and the modern West. The nation-states of Western Europe and their settler colonies overseas. The capital of the Roman Empire moved in the mid-1st millennium CE to Constantinople and remained there for over 1,000 years. Muslims, in the meantime, combined Greek learning with science from Persia, India, and Central Asia as new technologies streamed around Africa, Arabia, and the Indian Ocean, while sailors on northern seas and riders on the steppe channeled goods and ideas from China to Ireland. This is the huge world extending from the Pacific to the Atlantic that the rising nations of Western Europe inherited in the 15th century CE as they set out into a new one. These millennia of interaction have, however, largely been forgotten, drowned out by ideas developed in the Victorian period that organised the world into civilizations, separate and often mutually opposed. I want to tell a different story, one that doesn't begin in the Greco-Roman Mediterranean and then re-emerge in Renaissance Italy, but traces the relationships that built what is now called the West, from the Bronze Age to the Age of Exploration, as societies met, tangled, and sometimes grew apart. More broadly, I want to make the case that it is connections, not civilizations, that drive historical change.